And good evening. We begin with the tragedy in Texas, really a massacre. There is no other word tonight after an 18-year-old gunman shot and killed at least 21 people, 19 of them children, at an elementary school in the town of Uvalde. Now, late tonight, we've confirmed a few of the names of the victims, but other parents are still waiting, whether at a gathering point or outside hospitals, to find out if their children were among those staggering losses.
After the shooting, they don't know where she's at. I mean, the list, her name is not here, and we don't know a list of who's gotten flown out, and you're not letting us in at the hospital right now.
The uncertainty and the pain there. Meanwhile, in the town of about 16,000, described as a place where everybody knows everybody, there have been prayers, tears, and families just trying to make sense of it.
It's just breaking my heart. It's just breaking my heart. I just didn't ever expect anything like that to happen here in Uvalde. That was where I worked for 25 years. My husband was a principal there. My son went to school there.
Meanwhile, the president just back from his trip to Asia, reacting with sorrow and anger. Here's NBC's Bree Jackson on his call to action.
President Biden tonight addressing today's mass shooting at an elementary school in Texas. The commander-in-chief consoling the nation after the tragedy of innocent victims being gunned down.
To lose a child is like having a piece of your soul ripped away.
A Texas state senator briefed by Texas Rangers says at least 18 students and 3 adults are dead. Authorities identified the gunman as 18-year-old Salvador Ramos. Officials say he abandoned his vehicle, entered the school with a handgun and possibly a rifle. He was later shot and killed by police responding to the shooting.
We're in the process of obtaining detailed background information on the subject.
This horrific scene happened at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas, an area less than 100 miles west of San Antonio.
We are seeing way too many of these horrific mass murders.
The tragedy comes a week after a mass shooting at a grocery store in Buffalo, New York, and more than a decade after the shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School. This latest shooting is renewing passionate debates over gun control legislation.
Find a path forward here. Work with us to find a way to pass laws that make this less likely.
President Biden calling for action to prevent future tragedies.
Don't tell me we can't have an impact on this carnage.
A country once again experiencing unimaginable loss. In Washington, Bree Jackson for NBC News.
So I'm actually going to ask for just a quick moment of silence.
And tonight in Portland, the public school board took a moment to reflect ahead of their meeting on that unfolding tragedy in Texas and the many, many young lives lost. And given today's toll and the country's history with mass shootings in schools, it is understandable why school communities across this country would feel a deep sense of many emotions: grief, horror, heartbreak, just a few of them. Alma McCarty has a look at the local response to what's been widely called simply senseless.
The scenes from Uvalde, Texas, heartbreaking and tragic. Another school shooter killing students and staff at an elementary school days before the end of the year.
It's just another disturbing tragedy, an unfortunate reminder of the gun violence that grips our country and our communities.
District leaders with Portland Public Schools addressing the shooting at a board meeting Tuesday night.
And the enormity of these murders is really unbearable to think about. And I think no one, especially children, should ever have to fear for their lives when they're in our schools.
Not affiliated with Portland Public Schools, Rick Puente is the vice president of the state's School Resource Officer Association. He's a local SRO with 20 years experience.
There are times where when evil wants to do evil, evil chooses to do evil. It's how well we are prepared and trained to try to limit what evil does.
I spoke with him about how he would talk about these types of tragedies with young children.
How do we have these discussions with, as you mentioned, a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, an 8-year-old? I think you just open the door for them to share what's on their heart, right? Ask them what they're feeling. They're children. but they're not ignorant to the world that is happening around them.
I also asked him how schools should move forward after something like this. Puente says all districts must stop and reassess.
Am I doing everything I can in my capacity, in my role? And I believe that that should be a question that we all take a look at. Am I doing everything within my abilities to ensure the safety of those that we serve?
While he couldn't speak, of course, to the Uvalde district in particular, Puente says school security measures have evolved over the last decade. He says there's more attention now on who's coming and going from the school buildings. Security cameras and more advanced alert systems also allow schools to alert a whole building or even a district of an intruder. David?
Thank you, Alma, for your reporting here. Stay with KGW NBC News as we continue to cover this story out of Texas as stories emerge of loss and also heroism on air and online at kgw.com. Well, new tonight at 11, we want to take you back to that school board meeting. The big topic of discussion, the PPS budget proposal. Now, board members say certain cuts are necessary because they are facing a funding shortfall, and those opposing the cuts say they would actually create heavier workloads for educators, and some students would inevitably slip through the cracks. Now, after hours of discussion, the school board ended up approving that budget recommendation tonight. All right, now to a hostage situation on a MAX train near the airport. We want to let you know up front, this was resolved. Everybody is okay. It turns out the suspect, though, was already on police radar. Catherine Cook explains.
Portland police leading 41-year-old Marcus Tate away from the Mount Hood Avenue MAX station on Northeast Cascades Parkway. For nearly 2 hours Tuesday afternoon, police say Tate held a passenger hostage inside this MAX train while a MAX operator took shelter in the train's cabin. Police say Tate was armed with a knife and a skewer.
And I can only imagine the horror. At one point, I know the suspect was holding on to the hand of the male hostage, saying, "This is my hostage," and obviously they're, armed with a knife and something else sharp. I mean, that had to be horrifying.
Portland Police Commander Tina Jones says the call came in at 2:19. Multiple agencies responded, including the FBI, whose headquarters are just blocks away. Jones says attempts to talk with Tate didn't work. However, some officers did recognize him from a physical encounter they had with him the day before. They say Tate had suffered a mental health crisis and was hospitalized overnight on a police hold.
They had enough cause to believe was either harm to himself or others, and they put him on a police officer hold and took him to the hospital to get treatment.
One day later, this. Police saw an opportunity to act when Tate set his weapons on the ground. They deployed 2 flashbangs to distract him. That's when CERT members boarded the train and got the passenger and MAX operator off safely. Then they arrested Tate.
Obviously, we're very, very relieved that this did not turn into a more serious situation. These are the nightmare calls that we never want to have, but that we train for.
Back live in downtown Portland, Marcus Tate was booked into the Multnomah County Jail tonight. He faces multiple charges, including robbery, unlawful use of a weapon, and interfering with public transportation. David, back to you.
Catherine Cook reporting. Thank you, Catherine. Closing arguments have wrapped up and jury deliberations are underway in the murder trial of a local romance novelist. Nancy Crampton Brophy is accused of shooting and killing her husband Dan, a charge she has repeatedly denied, especially when she took the stand in her own defense. Let us bring you up to speed on the final day here. Prosecutors had a chance to rebut some of what defense argued during its close, and essentially it boils down to this. Defense says the couple were not in financial turmoil, and Nancy loved Dan so much she couldn't have killed him. Now, the state says Nancy wanted to cash in on multiple insurance policies and so had both the motive and the means.
Nancy is guilty of murdering her husband, and it is now up to you to deliver the justice for Chef Dan Brophy and the rest of the Brophy family.
If there's any reasonable possibility Nancy Brophy is not guilty, you must give her the benefit of the doubt, and you are required under our system of laws to return a verdict of not guilty.
Reasonable doubt. Okay, one of the linchpins in a case that is based around circumstantial evidence, Nancy's van was recorded on surveillance video near the scene at the time of the murder. Now, there were inconsistencies in her testimony, with her eventually admitting, yes, she drove around and took some notes for a book, but did not kill her husband. The jury resumes deliberations in the morning, and we will bring you that verdict if and when they reach one. All right, let's return to those blurry barcodes delaying ballot counts in Clackamas County and the results in one key congressional primary. Now, the county clerk tonight finally released a timeline. So moving forward, she now expects it to take 4 to 9 more days to complete the count. Yes, we're a week out from the election as of tomorrow. Now, Secretary of State Shemia Fagan here requested the timeline. She spoke to reporters today, saying she offered Clackamas County help within 24 hours of learning there was a problem. Now, the county clerk, Sherry Hall, declined that help at first, Fagan said. And here's the deal. Roughly 2/3 of ballots cannot be scanned by machines. They have to be duplicated by hand. As of tonight, more than 60,000 ballots had been processed. About that many are still outstanding. And after the Oregonian called for it in an editorial, Fagan was asked if she too would ask Hall, who, by the way, is a long-serving elected official, to resign.
I'm a Clackamas County resident, and obviously I found this incredibly frustrating and, quite frankly, just outrageous. And my North Star, though, as Secretary of State for the whole state, is to land this plane. And right now, the only person legally authorized to land this plane under Oregon law is the clerk. And so as long as she's the clerk, I will continue to work directly with her.
We can see the runway somewhere out there. As far as the timeline to finish, Hall says the 4 to 9 days again are going to depend on staffing, which looks very thin this coming holiday weekend. By law, the election must be certified by June 13th.